So the first thing that we're going to do is introductions. Then we're just going to do a chat storm of what do you think about supplemental instruction? What do you know? You can also do what questions you might have. So that'll give you a few moments. We'll take maybe 4 minutes to do the chat storm, and we'll talk about that's how we'll review supplemental instruction. Dean Zumo, Gia, and Nandrani gave us so much information, and then many of you are already using parts of supplemental instruction or all of it. So during that review of supplemental instruction, you can just put a few things in the chat storm in the chat, and we can all see it, and we can all discuss it for a few minutes. But first, I'll give you a few minutes to do that chat, and then we'll take a few minutes to discuss what people have written. It's sort of like if you could do a breakout room in a breakout room, which you might be able to do, but I'm not going there. So instead of doing, turn to your partner and talk, we're going to do a chat storm. Then we'll talk about emancipatory pedagogy. And then we'll look at the connection between the two. Then we'll look at incorporating emancipatory pedagogy into your courses and how that can all translate into tools, tips, and best practices. So let's go to introductions. So if we could just go through, if you could just tell us your name, your position at the college, and then respond to one of the prompts. Teaching is, fill in the blank. Learning is, fill in the blank, or students are. Greg, I'm not seeing the participants. So are you able to see the participants? And maybe you could call on each participant after I introduce myself, and then everybody else can introduce themselves. Does that work for you, Greg?
I can do it, Leslie, if you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Janice.
Sure.
My screen went to some full mode. Not sure. Okay. So I'm Leslie Crago. I'm an assistant professor in the teacher education department, and the prompt that I'm going to respond to is teaching is. So teaching is almost the other side of learning. As I teach, I learn more. And as my students learn, they're actually teaching me how to teach them. And that's sort of also from Vygotsky. So while I said do one prompt, I actually sort of did all three. But if there's also a different prompt that you would like to use or something else that you would like to say, that's fine too. So this is also a model of what are some different ways that you can get students to introduce themselves? How can you make the task a little bit more comfortable for them? And this is one task that you can do, give them a choice. And a way that you can make it easier for them, obviously, is to model. And some of these things you might already be doing. So if in your introduction, you might want to say, and a good way to introduce people is. So take it away, Dean Zumo. Introduce yourself first and respond to one of the prompts. And then if you would call on people to, and calling on people is challenging because they might not be ready. And you can always say, not yet, but trying to call on people, like to have people just jump in can be challenging. You could use the raise your hand feature, but that can take more time.
No,
This is just a quick way. So go ahead, Dean Zumo.
We're going to call on people. In order for us to do this smoothly, everyone
Yes.
should be prepared, which doesn't mean a lot. We're just going to speak from our hearts and say what we think. So my name is Janice Zumo, and my position is Assistant Dean for Academic Support Services. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. Supplemental instruction is near and dear to me. I'm going to say learning is a very personal process. Do I need to elaborate?
That is perfect. And thank you so much for that. We're going to do this from the heart. That is another thing to share with students. And she shared the fact that we're doing this smoothly. So keep going. Call on the next person.
Okay. So the next person on the list is Nari. I hope I said your name correctly.
Oh, it's Nari.
Nari. Yes. Good, good.
Yeah, I'm an adjunct here in the Media Arts and Technology department. I teach screenwriting and the introduction to the moving image. And in the fall, I'll also be teaching history of animation. And students are creative problem solvers.
Mm,
Yeah.
very nice.
Yeah.
Augustine.
Thanks, Janice. My name's Augustine.
No problem.
You even said it right. My name's Augustine. I'm an assistant professor in the Media Arts and Technology Department. I teach script writing, introduction to film, media in general. And I would say that learning is a lifelong process of discovery.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Amy.
Hi, everybody. I love this program, and I am an English teacher, professor in the English department, of course. And I would say that learning is the ultimate freedom because it allows you to try on ideas and discover so much about the world and yourself.
Great, thanks. Leslie, jump in at any time.
No, this is wonderful. I am loving listening. Keep going.
Great. Antonius. Hope that's right. Or Antonius.
Yes, thank you so much. Hi, my name is Antonio Suryajaya. I'm a multimedia artist and I teach at MEA, and I teach Intro to Multimedia Programming, and in the fall also Advanced Web Design. Students to me are an inspiration and they continue to be.
Great.
Yeah.
Eloy.
Hi, everybody. I'm an adjunct teaching multimedia. And the prompt that I was going to answer, Augustine already said it, which was learning is a lifelong process, which is something that I tell to students in the class because they're constantly going to be working on their portfolio. And that's something that I try to enforce in there, that it's not just a project that's in the class, but it's something that they're going to be doing throughout their career.
Mm-hmm.
It's really great when two people have the same idea because it shows us how really important that response is. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Good. George.
Hi, I'm George Robinson. I'm an adjunct in media arts and technology. I teach screenwriting. I mostly teach introduction to the moving image. Bear with me a second, my computer is doing something. Sorry. Teaching is, I see the role of the teacher is to provide a toolkit to the students for critical thinking. I did an interview many years ago with Isidore Rabi, who was a Nobel laureate in physics, a subject in which I got a C- and a C-, so I was a little nervous about talking to him. And he told a story. He said every morning when he would go to school as a little boy, his mother would hand him his lunch at the door, pat him on the head and say, Isidore, ask good questions. And I think that's what you're imparting to your students, is how to ask good questions.
Great.
Yeah.
And Greg.
Well, Leslie, you have a third one because my first thought was learning is continuous, is never ending.
Mhm.
I actually just said this to a few individuals at a meeting I had. Learning never ends, really. Right when you think you got it all, you can always learn something else. So I'm continuously learning. I enjoy learning, and I would say, yeah,
Mhm.
learning is continuous.
Great.
Even when you're 100 years old, you're still
Mhm.
learning something.
We hope so. That's what keeps us alive, I think.
Yeah.
That constant desire to learn. So I think we did everyone. If we didn't, shout out, but I believe I got everyone.
Right. There was one person who didn't respond, whose screen was dark.
Yeah. And now he doesn't seem to be here anymore.
Oh,
John,
that's okay.
John is wrong. I think he's the technical support.
No,
John
not John.
Lawford.
There was somebody
Okay.
named Philip, but maybe he was in the wrong breakout. So he's not
It
here.
was Philip Wiseman. He left the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
He-
He might have wanted to be in a different room. That's totally fine.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you so much for those heartfelt introductions. And I know that a lot of you already might know each other because you're in the same department. And yes, we do have a few other people here who are joining us. So it was good for us to get to know everybody a little bit at least. So this is the chat storm part. So using the chat feature, does anybody need like, how do I use the chat feature? And it's different on each computer actually, or each device sometimes. So please write about your understanding of supplemental instruction. It could be a phrase, it could be a few key words. And as you and you can do your responses to everybody. If there's something in particular that you want to talk to one person, that's also fine too, because maybe you will say, hey, let's reconnect about that. So the chat storm will go for like 3 minutes, and just, yeah, start typing in your understanding of supplemental instruction. You can use some of the information that Dean Zumo and Gia and Nandrani gave us. You can use information that you have from your own experience. And if you have a question there too, this is will all being recorded. And if we don't get back to your question today, we will get back to you at some point. Okay, so chat storm, start. Okay, so that wasn't 3 minutes, but I think that we have gotten some really good information already. And I see that there have been some questions. There was a question, is it good to use a former student? Yes, and that was already answered, so thank you. That's the other really great thing about using the chat feature. I was just about to type in the answer and somebody else already did it, which is great. And then support on choosing an SI. So it can be tricky. If you've already how to choose an SI, if you've already taught the course, think of some students who were outstanding and ask one or two of those outstanding students. Now, sometimes that outstanding student was really great in the class, but is a little bit shy. And this is a great opportunity for you to support them and help, and also Gia and then Johnny and the whole LRC will support them in this too. How to become a little bit more outspoken, a little bit more organized. So your SI leader will actually develop amazing skills. The main thing that you want in an SI leader is that they have mastered the class. They've shown creativity, ingenuity, rigor, true deep knowledge of the subject. So that's your main thing for how to choose an SI leader. Does anybody want to add to that? Other things that you would choose, and just jump right in.
Okay, I'm chewing, excuse me. I have back-to-back meetings from this morning till 4:30, so I have to eat. But anyway, I will stop chewing and say that I think SI leaders also need to be good communicators and engaging. They have to be willing to engage students. So a little bit of an outgoing type of personality, maybe just somebody will engage the students. And they need to do a little bit of administrative work, which we train them on how to do. So just that they would be interested in doing that also.
Yeah. Great. Anybody else have what they have felt was a good deciding factor why they chose a particular SI leader? Okay, if you think of something, you can always put it in the chat.
Let's say I could chime in real quickly, simply because I met with a group of SI leaders last week just to get some feedback from them. And while I was meeting with them, I realized a good technique or a good qualification, or I would say a skill that a SI leader should have is and it's not necessarily a skill, but they should be flexible with students. And I realized the SI leaders who were flexible, because students have schedules that are all over the place. And I heard some SI leaders mentioning sometimes they didn't always chat, use an online system like Zoom to speak with students. Some students were shy, so they use email. They if some students couldn't make it at a certain time, they readjusted their schedules to meet with a group of students at another time. So flexibility is a really, if a SI leader can be very flexible with the students, understanding that our students are from different backgrounds, different demographics, and some students are parents and they can always make it to the same group session. So the flexibility, and that's a difference from tutoring, which is more, hour to hour. It's at this hour and all the time. So SI leaders, I noticed, they're very flexible.
Yes, and I would add to flexibility is, and it's really important now, but the ability to use media. And so the media
Mhm.
students usually are great at this because
Mhm.
they know how to use Zoom, they know how to
Mhm.
use iPhones or phones, they know how to chat, they do all kinds of multimedia. So that's really important because a
Mhm.
lot of students don't
Mhm.
aren't traditional. They don't want to go to sit down in a specific SI session. They'd rather have a one-on-one or some kind of quick discussion.
Mhm.
So that kind of flexibility is good also.
Mhm.
Amy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in and say that sometimes I find a student who wasn't necessarily A++ student, but maybe a B or an A who struggled with something, and they fought through it. And really that comes into play when I pick a SI that can relate to what students would have trouble with. So I'm looking for somebody when I pick an SI who really is invested in the whole learning process, who goes forward past their blocks and can help other students do that. I also want to look for somebody who is able to understand the process of my class, the overall goals, so that they can help the students stick with it when things get rough. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I also find that with a lot of my supplemental instructors, they wanted me to mentor them outside of that position. And we ended up having a long-term relationship through their college career and even after they moved on. So I usually try to work with somebody who I can also help in the next phases of their education. So that's just something to think about.
Wow. So we had a question, and from the question of, of how to choose an SI leader, we got much more information about how SI is working, the flexibility, the need for communication, the need, and yes, so in educational psychology terms, we'd call what you were describing a coping model rather than a mastery model. And a coping model, as you stated, is really amazing because if I see somebody who already knows this and who's so good at it, I think, well, they're just good at it and I might not be. But if we see someone who is coping, figuring it out, we can think, wow, they're figuring out how to do this. They're problem solving. I could be a problem solver too. So yeah, I did start off by saying somebody who usually has done exceedingly well in the class. But so long as they understand your process and are committed and can communicate, that is uh, definitely a real plus also. So some other things that I saw in the chat in terms of supplemental instruction are things like it's amazing support for the students, it's success, it's empathy for the students. Is there anything else that someone saw that in the chat that helped them understand SI more?
I came a little late. My computer crashed mid-introduction. I'm Phil Wiseman, and I teach in the Media Arts and Technology program. I think with SI supplemental instructors, they have to be understanding and patient and somewhat mature individuals. They have to be students, which is allows them to relate more on a peer level, but also they have to be fairly patient because a lot of our students are getting material for the first time. Our supplementary instructors have had at least one round of what we do, so they have some indication of where to go. But I think they're also learning as well. They're learning it because they are on second round. So they have to sort of be patient with their own learning process and also with the questions that come forth from the students. So I think that's that's why one of the reasons I chose the person I did, because she is extremely patient and articulate, and doesn't feel that she has to completely emulate my style at all. So that I think those are qualities you might look for in an SI person.
Welcome, Phil. Sorry you had difficulty. I think we're all experiencing Zoom computer or some technological issues at some point or other. But yes, your points are well taken. Patience, articulation. I did have an SI leader who was a former student. He actually had even graduated from his 4-year program. He was waiting to become a teacher. I'm in teacher education. So while he was waiting to take the teacher certification exams, he did work as an SI leader for me. And the thing is not only did he have knowledge of my class, but he also had a lot of knowledge of the teacher education process at the 4-year school. And he was really able to provide students with support. And you really need to know this concept because it's going to come up on the certification exam. But even more importantly than that, this is the backbone of what you need to know if you're going to be an effective teacher working with children. So I have found support for people who were no longer students at BMCC being SI leaders. Is that still the case, Dean Zumo? Or Greg?
Yes.
Sorry. I had to unmute. Sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
That's okay.
Yeah, we do have SI leaders and tutors as well, who are former students who moved on to, let's say, Hunter College, another CUNY school, but they are currently SI leaders, but they were at one point BMCC students. So that is true.
Yeah.
And some of them are pursuing their bachelor's. Some has already obtained their bachelor's and are still tutoring. Providing supplemental instruction.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that gives us a few more options. So if it's somebody you knew from a few years ago, that could still work.
Mhm.
Okay, great. So let's move on. Oops. Wait, where am I? All right. So we did the chat storm and emancipatory pedagogy. We talk a lot about culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally sustaining, culturally relevant pedagogy. Emancipatory pedagogy has grown out of that field and is similar. I feel for me, it's a little bit more accurate and speaks a little bit more to what our students might be experiencing. So the first thing is that in emancipatory pedagogy, instructors profess that KWL chart. What do you know? What questions do you have? What did you want to learn? Well, how am I going to use this? So we do a KWL-H chart. How am I going to use this? How is this useful? How is this meaningful? So we are holding high expectations. Our students can succeed. So emancipatory pedagogy also makes the students knowledgeable of the positive contributions of their race, of their culture, of their ethnicity, of their values and beliefs. It is not just that you have to work according to the dominant language, the dominant standards that might be presented within this country. There are many ways of being, many ways of knowing, and those are positive contributions. And there are many people who are overlooked. The contributions of Native Americans during World War II in breaking the code, the contributions of women in getting the first rocket out into space. We talk about Einstein. We don't talk about many of the other people who have really excelled and I mean, many of us do, but many of our students might have come through learning about George Washington and maybe not learning enough about some of the other people who look like them who've made positive contributions. We also, in emancipatory pedagogy, work to help students develop a critical lens of consciousness, to examine the root causes of their oppression. And many of us, even though we might not think about it, have been oppressed in one way or another. Everything from "you're a boy, stand up, act like a man," to I'm going to be a little personal here. My own mother was told that, "What do you mean you think you want to be a lawyer? Think about who you are and just be a secretary. Don't be so high and mighty." Oppression, it crosses all boundaries, and people need to realize how it's affected them. And then, what am I going to do about this? How am I going to develop ways to end the oppression that I and my people are experiencing? So you can look to Duncan for more on this. This is like just the 3 main takeaways from emancipatory pedagogy. Any questions, any additions if you've used this framework? Is there something that you'd like to add to it, a clarification or a question?
Yeah, I think the pandemic really highlighted some of the stuff that I wasn't anticipating, especially around stuff like technology. So when we were mid-semester and we went to remote learning, we had the classes that I was in, we had to have conversations about like, okay, what do people have that they could use, right? Like, as far as like, do you have a laptop, right? Do you have a quiet place to work? And that was pretty surprising that there were so many of the students that were reliant on the computer labs, on the licenses, that the actual physical structure, and just bridging that gap and making things work for the rest of the semester was an eye opener. I was like, "What do you mean you don't have you don't have a tablet? Like you don't have 2, right?" So that was that was.
Many of them had phones, and that was it. And even then, they didn't have reliable internet.
Right.
The college really was helpful in procuring devices, but even that, yeah, I mean, talk about, yes, highlighting, and that in itself, the technology divide, the gap in and of itself is oppressive.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do well because we're not going to provide you with what you need.
Yeah.
Not that any of us said that, but that's what has been happening.
Expectation based on the policy that everybody was thrown into. The quiet space was another thing. Like outside of like, okay, you have a phone, here's how you could get into the class. We have students that were living on top of other people, right? So like in the middle of the class, every time that they unmuted, I'm hearing like a TV going, kids screaming, and like 2 people arguing, right? Like there's a lot going on as they're in the class and trying to learn, so yeah, and not to say that was solved, but I'm very aware of it now. That's where these students are coming from. Yeah.
Right. And this is the thing, to say to students, the fact that you don't have this isn't right. What can we do to fix this? And that's the,
right.
That's this last part here.
Right.
Great. I'm a little mindful of time, so I'm going to go to the next slide. Whoops. So the next slide is pretty blank. It's for you to kind of just fill in, raise your hand, jump in. But do you see connections between supplemental instruction and emancipatory pedagogy?
I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead, Eloy. Oh, I just wanted to say, it seems like both of them are equipping the students with tools that they can use to become empowered themselves so that they're not passive recipients of information, but they're actually sort of driving their own education and lives in a way.
Yeah. And I could have filled this in. And this is something, again, that I'm sort of modeling, giving students bits of information, some information about SI, some information about emancipatory pedagogy, and then asking the students to come up with it themselves, having them know how to take two pieces of information and use it, connect it, giving them a tool, you know, that they can, oh, well, I know X and I know Y. How can I put it together? So, and yeah, they are both very powerful tools to help students with their learning. Yeah. Other connections?
Yes, it occurs to me that one of the basic limitations on any instructor is you're only one person. You only have one background on which you can draw. And the degree to which your students can identify with that will vary. One of the things that seems to me to be a logical connection between SI and emancipatory pedagogy is being able to pick an SI instructor who is different from you. I mean, none of my students look like me, partly because none of them are 67, and balding. But more than that, I mean, I'm a New York born and raised Jew who, you know, I mean, my life experience is what it is. I mean, intellectually, I think I engage with emancipatory pedagogy, but it always is useful if somebody is in front of the class or in some capacity like that who looks like the student.
Yeah. Thank you for your honesty and openness there. Yeah. And that's also so helpful, you know, that as we can be honest and open and allow for multiple viewpoints and multiple means of support. And that's something in both SI and emancipatory pedagogy. Other things?
The SI sessions, outside of the class could really help the emancipatory pedagogy and building community. In the MEA program, in our Media Arts and Technology program, part of what we teach is a collaborative process in creating projects. And so whatever the differences are among the students in terms of their backgrounds, part of the skill set is how do they work together? How do they talk with each other? How do they, supplement each other's activities? And so in the SI sessions, this can, through brainstorming and other devices, can be, enhanced and elaborated on. So I think that's a really good place, without, let's say, the faculty or the instructor's intervention. They can feel more free to do that and to get to know each other. So I think this is part of it. And then, with the issue of the pandemic and where we couldn't really have crews, we couldn't have production crews really.
Yeah.
At least we could find creative ways for them to create production crews or have people in front of the camera, with their friends and family who were within their pods. So we were able to kind of do that, but it was a bit of a steep hill to climb. And it continues to be, working remotely like this.
Yeah. Okay. So with SI, we are also holding high expectations of our students because we're providing them with the support so that they can succeed. And you actually answered, we've, I think, gone through the connections there pretty well. So Incorporating emancipatory pedagogy into our classes. This is an example from teacher education. In terms of the high expectations, the rigor, one of the courses that I teach is for people who want to be caregivers for infants and toddlers. And the rigor is that, and the high expectation is that they will provide high quality care, not just babysitting, relationship responsive, reciprocal based care. Those are our 3 R's. We would also like them to be what we also support them, encourage, not just like, but our expectation is that they will be thoroughly knowledgeable of child development as they continue to be lifelong learners. The second point of emancipatory pedagogy in terms of an example of incorporating it into our class is the cultural knowledge. We will pull in readings from James Comer, who is a Black psychiatrist who has developed a model of learning that is a little bit different than John Dewey, who is a white guy from Chicago. We'll look at Native American education. We'll look at Indigenous education in Australia. The readings and the videos will not just be about, well, this is how education has been in this country, but we will look at the contributions of specific cultures and how children are educated in different cultures and what people value. Competition is valued a lot. What's your grade point average? Did you graduate at the top of your high school class? And that's completely different than what we were just talking about in terms of collaborating. And there is a big push toward collaborative education in many other cultures. So we look at the contributions of other cultures and how they educate their children and how those are also, if not more, positive means of education. So then the last one is we will look at and examine means of oppression. Why were the Native Americans children taken from their families, forced to cut their hair? What has this done to their culture? Why were they put in Native American boarding schools rather than being allowed to be educated by their families? Even though we had desegregation, basically what happened with that is the children used to go to all Black schools. Well, they basically then started integrating them, but they fired all of the Black teachers because they didn't want them teaching in the white schools. When children came from South America, they had to stop speaking Spanish, or they were given tests of knowledge in English and they only spoke Spanish, so they were placed in special education. So we deeply examine all of these points and many others. Students write reflective journals on it, and then they create advocacy projects. So those are some ways that we use emancipatory pedagogy in our teacher education classes. And then I am very interested, to hear how you already use, and we got a little bit of that already, or might think about what's an assignment that you have that you might add a little bit more rigor to, or an assignment that you have that would make students more knowledgeable of their culture, or an assignment or within your course, your syllabus, how you would help students to understand oppression. And actually I think you're in such a phenomenal space, creating documentaries about people who have been oppressed, or creating documentaries about people who are rising up, dismantling some of the kinds of oppression, or this is your area of expertise. So this is your time to share with your colleagues and to share with us ways that you would incorporate emancipatory pedagogy along with SI into some of your courses. Raise your hand or just jump in.
So I have my hand raised, but
sorry, there we go. Yes.
One thing I immediately do when I go into my syllabus is look through and see which parts have some sort of historical meaning to it or some historical context. And in programming, like somebody had mentioned earlier, a lot of the women and a lot of the BIPOC people in history have been erased from the sources. So I make an intention in the slides to incorporate those historical figures in my slides. And also to bring up the fact that you probably never heard of this person, but this woman was the person who created the term debugging, you know, and he also showed some other things like that. I even bring it into certain things like when we Photoshop people, um, sometimes people use models that are very generic looking, and that genericness, you know, it kind of creates like some sort of prototypical model, right? So if you bring in more diversity into those models in which we create media from, that also helps from it. So that is my way of introducing emancipatory pedagogy into my field.
Yeah. Wow. And thanks. I did not know that debugging was coined, invented, introduced by a woman. So there we go. And now I feel a little bit like the next time I have a problem, I can maybe try to debug it too. Yeah. Amy, I think I saw your hand up, and not all hands are appearing. So if if you're not called on, just jump in. But Amy, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I did. I was just basically saying that, of course, I mean, all of my courses have to be looked at from this vantage point. I teach women's lit and children's literature and creative writing. So in those three classes, it's important to be able to have a larger scope of what it looks like to study something cross-discipline and see what affected those areas of genre and so on and so forth. But even in English 101 and your gateway courses, I think we've done a lot of work as a department to just make sure that we are being not only diverse in what we're teaching, but current. And I think it's been a struggle for us to both teach some classic things as the world is shifting on their perspectives. And, I think the current things out there to parallel a current piece with an older piece is a really good thing to get the class talking and doing their own introspection on what it means to question history itself and live in a world where I think there's like a sliding truth. So I think that's more the angle that I'm looking at from the humanities perspective.
That was quite a mouthful. The shifting perspective, and that you're already doing the work is phenomenal. But yes, to be reminded of the fact that things are shifting so much, so we need to keep reflecting. Yeah, George.
On a certain level, teaching MES 140, which is our introduction to the moving image class, it's a little tough because I'm trying to teach a virtually new vocabulary and an entirely new way of looking at predominantly film, but moving image art. And I need to balance that, but partly because of my temperament and my own political ideology, and partly because I can't imagine teaching it any other way, I always root what I'm doing in a larger historical context. I mean, on some level, you could reduce my entire syllabus to how did the Industrial Revolution breed cinema, and how does all of the historical political change in the world between 1895 and this morning's newspaper impact film, the kind of films that get made, the kind of films that get shown, and the kind of films that don't get shown. So it's, I'm looking at this and I think, well, this is what I do.
Great. So you, if you haven't already said this is what you do according to Duncan, you can if you want, or it's great to know that you already do it. That another thing that I thought of is English, right? Literature. And so, sorry, I thought you guys were media, arts, and technology. So I had you down as ME because I know you're not MAT, but I thought you were MET, you're MEA, media, arts, or you what are your letters for your?
MEA.
Media, entertainment,
It's
and
MEA.
arts.
So forgive the MET. But going back to, so media, arts, and technology and literature, wow, I see a collaborative project, like co-teaching, thinking about the moving image, teaching about that, and then taking a children's story or something from women in literature and incorporating it with a project in film or script writing or I don't think we do a lot of that at this college, but I think that that would really be something, if any, I'm just throwing it out there. It wasn't even part of the presentation, but just something to think about, a way to put these two beautiful art forms together, literature and media arts. Just food for thought. So the last thing that we were going to do, and I'm sure that you all have many other examples of how you use this, and we can continue this conversation at some point, but I think they're going to call us back to the main room soon. And when we go back to the main room, we are supposed to report back with tools, tips, and best practices for supplemental instruction. And we have tools about choosing an SI. So we've had a lot of answers on that. So we could share that as one of the tips, because we do want to make sure we have good supplemental instruction leaders, appropriate, adequate, no, more than adequate, engaging, communicative, yes. The fact that another really good tip is that supplemental instruction is a tool for lifelong learning, that it provides us with multiple viewpoints and diversity. It provides us with community and the ability to collaborate. Are there other tips, best practices that you would like to share that could be shared out with the whole group? Other things that you've thought of as best practices, or like, I do this with SI. I do this with SI and Emancipatory Pedagogy, and this is something that I'd like everybody to know about, so they might want to consider using it too. Or if you have questions on anything we've done or talked about.
I think you've covered so much, and I really appreciate everything you've covered. I really have learned so much. I haven't selected an SI yet, and I have somebody in mind, but she's currently a pastry chef and also taking my class. And I wonder if asking her to be an SI, which I know she will immediately do, is going to add more burden to her, and if that's something that I should think about as well.
That is, we talked about empathy, and that is very kind and empathetic of you. I would give her the opportunity because I would probably preface it with, I know you're really busy, and more than anything, I want you to be able to succeed in school and continue. But if this is something that you think you might have time for, and I think if you phrased it like that, and with the new models that we're coming up with, it could be that it doesn't. So my SI works probably 6-7 hours a week, probably a little more because she's so conscientious. So it might not be that she would need to work that many hours. So that's something you can think about, how many hours, and that might be helpful for her.
Professor, I would also add that one of the positives that we notice about SI is that SI has increased during the pandemic, and its flexibility. There was online tutoring prior to leaving the campus. However, online supplemental instruction did not occur until
Mhm.
March of last year. So now the flexibility of providing services, SI services online is a possibility, and it will continue. So you may want to, ask her, and she can do it remotely.
Mm.
So that's a positive, I would say, of the pandemic. Now SI is online,
Yeah.
so it may offer some flexibility for her.
Yes, I have a completely asynchronous class, and my supplemental instruction leader has been a lifesaver for my students because they can come to my office hours, they can meet with me, but it can be a little crowded sometimes, or just she's actually a little bit more flexible than I am just because she's not working right now. Um, and for the students to have a continual physical, well, I don't know, we're not really physically present, but a physical face that they can see in an asynchronous class, it has really been tremendously helpful for them. So asynchronous classes in SI, definitely.
Can you tell me more about how you structure that? I'm so curious. I love this idea, and I teach a lot of asynchronous courses. In fact, all of them are asynchronous. So do you have her contact information in the Blackboard? Like, do you have like a discussion board set up just for her, or how does it work?
So she has access to my Blackboard course as a teaching assistant, even though she's not a teaching assistant. But as with that level of access, she can send students emails, she can create announcements, she can monitor the discussion board. She can set up her own discussion board forums, but um, my students have to post in the discussion board every week, and that's been enough. So she's conscious of not overburdening them with something else. So she and I plan via email or via WhatsApp because we both like that. And we do a little bit of planning. I let her know what I see the student struggling with, and she lets me know what she sees them struggling with in her sessions. She has 2 1-hour sessions that one is like Wednesday evening and the other is Saturday morning, but she has a few students who need a different time, and she meets with them at 7 a.m. on Friday morning. So then she'll swap out some of her Saturday morning sessions sometimes. She's brand new. So this is amazing that she didn't have supplemental instruction when she took the class with me. So this was a big jump for her. But through the training and through our collaboration, and the planning, we just talk for like 10 minutes maybe. And then there's a follow-up email. And she's very intuitive. She's a real good go-getter. And I see we have
2 minutes.
okay.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Great.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'll just end it with that's how I've structured it. Just the planning. So each week I say, this is what we're working on. And she knows it anyway, because it's all on Blackboard, and she does great. And my email is at the top of the PowerPoint, which I don't know if you have access to, but I'm sure. And also, it's L Crago at BMCC. I use that. So please feel free to email me any
put it-
additional questions.
Can I put that in the chat,
Oh,
Leslie?
perfect. Thank you. El Crago. Yes, Craig with an O.
Chat. Really?
Thank you, Janice. Thank you all for your attention. And there was a thank you slide at the end of the PowerPoint, but that's okay. I generally include those just because. So any additional questions, that'll be great. Email, and then we'll see each other in the big breakout room. And Greg, do you want to do the feedback, or I can do it? Either way is fine with me.
We can share.
Okie
I can
dokie.
talk about some of the tips, and whatever I miss, you can chime in.
Great, super.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much, Greg. I actually
Okay.
was finally able to take notes. I am now multitasking, but you go ahead and do it.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
thanks for your support, Janice. Thanks for your support, everybody. Thanks for
Thank
being
you
here.
so much.
Yes.
Mhm.
Bye.